Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Amari, your Perpetual Tech Noob, learning more with you. I got a little bout of the OCDs. I had to come back, and I didn't make a video out of it because the algo challenges is supposed to represent if I was to go on a tech interview, and of course, it's supposed to be on the fly without knowing it beforehand is what I'm trying to say. Regardless, like I said, I was very upset that I not only lost the algo challenge, but to lose this LeetCode challenge, and it was bugging me. So I came back today. It took me about a half an hour to get this done, but at the same time, this was just me in front of the computer, so there was no one to impress, no one to please. And of course, that makes it a lot easier to get through. Getting back to it, I want to go over this answer with you. It evidently worked, right? And like I said, it was about a half an hour. The fact is, I had an understanding after I failed that algo challenge, and when I came back, it was nothing to it. Okay? This may look very verbose. Hopefully by the time I finish explaining, you'll get an understanding of everything that I put in here. One more thing I wanted to say was that, well, first of all, let me say that both of these were today. This one was the same answer, just submitted again to show you all the speed ranking of it. The fact is that when I recorded earlier, I forgot to plug in my microphone. So first of all, best word, instead of making a list and going through that list later on, I figure I might as well just change it on the fly, depending on certain parameters that I'll try to explain later as well. In the meantime, I'm going to set sdict to an empty dictionary. This for loop right here is to populate this sdict, right? The dictionary for the string s. As you can see, I use the enumerate function, Python's built-in enumerate function. If you don't know what Python's enumerate function does, it will take something that you can iterate through, like a string, a list, maybe the keys in a dictionary, and it will give you that particular value, but it will give you the index of it first, because enumerate generally, if you don't change how it operates, it would always start at 0. Because here in computer land, when we're going through iterations or indexes, we start at 0. Okay, so moving on. For the index, I represents the index. For the index in character, C represents the character. In enumerate S, of course, the first, let's say, let's go here. In this string, the first item would be A, and that would be index 0. Like I said, we start at 0. So it would be 0A for this particular iteration. If C, that character, which is, let's say in this case, is currently A, if C is in sdict, what we're going to do is we're going to grab that key, and for its value, we're going to add I, the current index, to a list. If C is not in the dictionary, right, our else statement, we're going to create a key for the current character, and for the value, what we're going to do is throw that current index in a list, right? Now, this makes good sense when you say, okay, if I came through the first character, or it's the first time I'm touching this character, I'm going to put it as a key in sdict, and I'm going to make a list, but it's only going to have one item in it so far, and that would be that particular index. The next time I find this character, that character is already a key for For SDict, because we went through it before, and we have a value, a list with only one item in it, the index where it was first seen. But now we're seeing it again. So we're going to take that same key, and instead of making a new value, we're just going to add on the current index to the end of that list. So I hope that explains my if-else statement of how I would populate this SDict in this for loop. I want to show you an example of what would come of that. Okay. You may have noticed that whenever I make a print statement, I usually include a string that would tell me what I'm supposed to be reading. If I was to see in the standout just this information, and I had other things to print out, I might not know exactly which print statement made the current output. So I usually put in a string first so that I could easily identify where it came from. Moving along. This is SDict after I completed my for loop for this particular string. Right? B, you only see B in index 1, no other B's. So on and so forth. Now that that is explained and you could understand my dictionary and the set of values that come with every individual key, we'll move on. Over here, now that I got my SDict ready, and every key, which is the characters in S, have values that show their index that they show up in that string S, I made another for loop for every word in the list that they call dictionary. I still don't like that, but moving on, right? It's not about me right now. I made a for loop for the words in the dictionary. I'm gonna get to this example that I created later. In the meantime, for every word in the dictionary, first of all, I'm going to have a variable called last letter S index. This is supposed to represent, hey, the last letter that I checked, which is going to be later on, right? Because I'm not only going to deal with the word, but I'm going to have to break the word down into individual characters. The last letter that I checked, I want you to put down the index that it showed up in S. And I have a list of the indices of every individual letter that was in S. So I have something to help me out with that. But in the meantime, I'm gonna set it to -1 because like I said earlier, indexes start with 0. There will never be a -1 index. That being said, that variable I set up for later work. And every time I run through this for list and I get a new word, that will be returned to -1. Moving on. Y'all know me, endless iteration. At least I figure you do by now. This list iteration variable, and this is supposed to be a quick statement to hurry up and move on with the next in the iteration. If I find any characters that are not in S in our current word. This faulty letter count, though, you might consider it to be a bad variable name because on first sight, you would expect it to be associated with this list of faulty letters, but it's not. This is for me to keep track on if these pass, and let's say in this case over here that I made in this test case, if every character that's in our current word, if it is in S, it will pass this section. So now I'm gonna need something to keep track on if the characters are out of place relating to the placement of those characters in S. if you remember, to see if the words are applicable to the string, I can't rearrange these letters. The fact is, I can omit certain letters in place if they don't match what's going on with the particular word I'm looking at. Let's say an apple. A, I could skip a B. The P, I could skip a C. The P, L, E are there. And of course, I don't have to worry about anything else because apple is already spelled out. But if it was a case of this, right? A, B, C, P, P, L, E, A. That wouldn't work because I would have A, I would have B, but between B and P, there's no C. But it's okay. I would skip this first P and say C. Okay, now I got C. Fine. Then I would go to P. P would be here. Then I would go to the next P, and there are not two P's that come after this C. So this will not be able to work. That's why it was part of the test case that I created for myself. Going back, this faulty letter count, when I get past this first test, is going to be used to see if I should actually add that word, if that word is applicable to be added, based on those parameters where I just try to line out for you. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Well, let's just go through this. For C in Word, right, I have this here to show case if this doesn't work. There's a reason why I put it in a try except block, because there might be an error that comes back with it, and I don't want my code to stop. I just want to deal with that error that I expect in a particular way. Okay? So going through it, I'm going to try to make a list iteration setup, and I'm going to grab the first item in that list when time comes. Now, what is that list iteration setup? I want a list of every number for all the numbers in sdict, whatever key that we're looking at the time, because the key would be that particular character, whatever character that we're on that particular word. Remember, this is a for loop within a for loop, so I know it's pretty slow already, but let's continue. Give me every number for the numbers in that key of sdict if the number is greater than last letter S index. That's where this comes into place, right? So let's say we're looking over this particular one. The first character in that word would be A. What will this list iteration give me back? Well, last letter index is -1. A has two numbers in it, 0 and 7. They are both greater than -1. So in this case, let's say this is the word that we're looking for. The first time I'm going to get back 0 and 7. Why? Because last letter index is -1 right now. 0 and 7 are both greater. Seeing that the last letter S index is -1, both of these numbers are applicable. And what I told it to do at the end is grab the first item. Of course, that would be 0. That is A. Now that I grabbed that 0, what did I do with that 0? I put that into last letter S index. So it was -1. Now it's 0. Right? Because I grabbed the first item and I told it, replace whatever's there with the first item in this little mini list that I created. Right? And I'm still in the for loop. I'm not going outside of the for loop yet. So seeing that that worked, and I don't have any more instructions in this for loop that I have to follow, right? Because I don't have to worry about the except because the try actually passed. There was no errors. So I'm going to just continue in this little section of the loop. The next letter is B, right? Now, what would the list look like? Well, last letter index is 0. So we want all the numbers in sdict for the key B that is greater than 0. Well, it only has 1, but that number is greater than 0. And then I'm telling it, hey, grab the first item out of this list. It only has 1, so it grabs that first item. It puts it as the last letter S index. Last letter S index is now 1. I'm sure you can see the sequence of how this will build up, where that I can make sure as I'm moving further, I'm always keeping track of the last letter, its index in S. And I can always make sure that I'm only going to change it if it is better than what is currently there. Anyway, the last one I checked was B. That gave us back a 1. What we're going to do now is check out C. For C, my current last letter S index is 1, right? And it says, hey, find me all the numbers in the key of sdict that, well, the current character is C. It looks kind of funny, but the current character is C. So I want the key for C. I want its value. Matter of fact, I want all the numbers in its value that are greater than, in this case, 1. Well, it only has 1, and that's 3. Okay, excellent. Take that, the first item, which is the only item this time, and throw that into last letter S index. Last letter index, last letter S index is now 3, right? So we're going to move on. Now, we're looking for P, right? And pardon me, my heater just came on, and this mic is pretty good at picking up stuff. So if you do hear my heater running in the background or the pipes growing and shrinking in the walls, please pardon me. Moving on. We're looking for P now. And of course, back to the same little list iteration. We're looking for all the numbers in that key. Sorry, we're looking for all the numbers for the value of that key in sdict. The key is P. So let's go and see what the values were. 2 and 4. But last letter index is a 3, and we want only items that are greater than last letter index, last letter S index. So what is that? In P, the only one that was greater than 3 is this 4. Fine. We're grabbing the first item, which happens to be the only item in here, and we're going to replace last letter index, last letter S index, pardon me, with that number. Last letter S index is now 4, right? And this is the lovely part of catching something that doesn't correspond with their rules. We're looking for, whoops, that was LEA, right? APP, PPLEA. Yeah, anyway. Now that we're looking for this next P, right? We want the number for numbers in sdict for the current character, the key that's represented by the current character, in this case, P again. So we want these items, but we only want the numbers if they're greater than last letter S index. Last letter S index is currently 4. we don't have any items in here that's greater than 4, right? We have one that's equal, but we don't have any that's greater. So this ends up being an empty list, which brings us to this situation here. This will give us a list index error. That's why I had to put it in the try except block. I am expecting an error, but I don't want my computer code to stop in its tracks. I want it to continue to the end. So I have to find out what I can do to have it continue to operate and continue to operate properly. So in this particular case, seeing that I would have gotten an error, it goes to the except clause. What does the except clause say? It finally brings in faulty letter count, right? Faulty letter count will always be 1 at the highest. Why? Because as soon as I add 1 to it, I'm breaking out of this for loop. Get me out of here. I'm not going to look through any more characters in this word. Break me out of here. Now I have this if statement. Now that I'm out of the for loop, I have this if statement. The if statement starts here. If faulty letter count is equal to 0, if I was able to make it through all these letters and all the placements were proper, faulty letter count would have never, I would have never hit the except. My list iteration would have always had numbers to populate it, and I would always be able to grab the first item. So I would have never hit the except clause. That being the case, when it's all said and done for that particular word, after I look through all the characters, my faulty letter count would still be 0. So only when my faulty letter count is still 0, I never added anything to it because I never went through an error, I'll look for 2 clauses. There go the pipes. The first clause, the easiest one. If the length of the current word is bigger than the length of best word, right? Best word is here. Then best word equals the current word. Now, best word starts off as an empty string. It doesn't even have a space in it. It's just empty. So the length of this is 0. And the length of best word, of course, because it would be a string that has something in it, would of course be more than that. So automatically, best word equals the current word, right? Now, what if I went through a particular situation where my current word is not bigger than best word? What if they're exactly the same length? Well, if they're the same length, right, the length of word is equal to the length of best word, I'm going to set best word to be this. What is this? What are you talking about? What is this? Okay. I'm going to throw the current word and best word into a list. It's a simple list. The current word and what's currently the best word. And I'm going to sort them with the normal sorting function, right? This should give me back, if I'm dealing with strings, it definitely should give it back in a lexicographical order. And then I'm going to grab the first item, which would be the smallest in the lexicographical order. Right. So I made a little sort function and I grabbed the first one. So if they're both equal in length, then the one with the smallest lexicographical order would of course be first, and I'll just grab that first item and best word will now equal that particular first item. Best word will be replaced with that. And I'll continue and continue on, having my checks to make sure that the actual sequence of the characters in the word that I'm checking for is corresponding to the sequence of the characters in the original S. Now, with that said, right, before my OCD starts blaring at me, let me get rid of this stuff. right? We already printed sdict. I am going to run a test, right? Matter of fact, I'll print sdict again. But I made an example up here. Because I used the variable name dictionary, whatever dictionary that they're going to give me, dictionary is their list of words or strings, whatever you want to call it. Whatever their list is, I just changed it to be my own because I use the same variable name, right? But as you can see in this list called dictionary that I created, I have their exact same examples that they granted for both examples. As it stands, if I didn't add anything, of course, apple would be the best word. But since I did add things, they have 2 more items to check. We already went through this as an example, so you know that this is, let's say, out of sync, right? So this one will definitely be wrong, and that's one reason why I put it there, just to see. I want to have a longer word than anything else that does contain all the characters that's in here, so it will pass the first check, but it will get caught in the secondary check. Moving on, I also have something that has more characters than apple, and it will still fit in the situation. It will still follow their rules. It will still be able to become an output as long as it is the longest word with the smallest lexicographical order. Even that alone, the lexicographical order, that is a little confusing. Anyway, I'm glad that I get to see this so I can experience it. Next time I hear it, I'll know exactly what they're talking about. They won't trip me up with this again. Hopefully. Anyway, in this case, you can see that it has 1 more character than apple, right? So it's larger than apple, but is it in the proper sequence? You have A, you have B, then you have P, it skips this C, then you have a P, and then you have a L, and it skips this E, and then you have an A. So this word is supposed to end up being the best word in my particular little test case. Now, because of that, I'm going to get these 2 wrong because I gave it my own list of strings, right? But it's to show that it actually works. Moving on. I'm going to run this so that we can see our own individual string in our test case come out as the victor. But what did we get back as a return? A, B, P, P, L, A. The word that we were expecting in my particular test. That being said, I'm going to comment that out. I'm also going to comment out the printout for sdict. We know that it works. Oh, and one more thing I would like to say. If you're in the middle of a tech interview, you may want to consider just throwing some print statements around the place. As you're moving on, you might not be able to test it time and time again, depending on who's doing the technical interview. Some people will have you doing it on a whiteboard, which of course is degrees harder, right? But some people will give you an IDE to work with, and they will allow you to run simple tests while you're writing your code. So continue to test as you go along. One more thing I would like to add, and this was a tip that I got from Anthony D. Mays. If you haven't heard of him, please look him up. Whether you do it on LinkedIn or YouTube, this man is phenomenal, all right? With an illustrious career to back up that claim that I'm making. He didn't even make this claim, but he is phenomenal. Regardless, one tip that he gave me is that when you're in the middle of a tech interview, you shouldn't write out comments for every line of code to explain every line of code before you write it out, because now you're doubling the amount of time, if not more, that it would take for you to write that line of code. I like to write my intuition because if things get intricate, I could always refer back to that, to what was my train of thought when I first encountered the problem, and what was the sequence that I would have implemented in my code. And it's also something to look back on if you need to troubleshoot, or if you need to change things up. You could say, okay, that's where I went wrong. Now that I got a better understanding, I went wrong there. But at the same time, it takes a lot of your time, especially if you're a slow typer like me. So, moving on. I commented out that, as a matter of fact, I don't need it anymore, and my OCD is gonna mess with me. So I'm going to run this, and happily, both test cases worked. But hey, both test cases worked when I failed that algo challenge too, right? And that's why when I was filming this earlier to try to explain how simple it is to do it when you're doing it by yourself, but when you add on the pressure of trying to explain your code concisely out loud and trying to keep the timing in order so that you keep your host engaged, all these extra pressures would lead you to making more mistakes, to taking more time than you're allotted. In the meantime, right now as it looks, I can't figure out a way to refactor this to make it better, and I have an issue with going and finding other people's solutions. That's another thing I should mention that you may have noticed. I love puzzles. I love puzzles, all right? So if I can find the answer myself instead of, worried about someone else's, I would much rather that. That's the score that I got. That's what I'm trying to show you. When it comes to LeetCode, most people say that you're supposed to try the question for a half an hour or an hour or maybe 2 hours at most. And if you can't get through it, what you do is you go to the solutions and you look at someone's solution. You try your best to understand it. You try to recreate it without looking back at their answer, because now you have an understanding of the sequence. Me, seeing that now that I passed it myself through my own, intuition, through my own brain power, now I can, not to say that I will, but I definitely should, because I didn't get 100% speed ranking. And I can't fathom a way to recreate it as yet. But I can now go to the solutions, because I'm sure once I go to solutions, probably the first answer is going to be like 5 lines, and it's going to be like, wow, I went through all this. Anyway, as you can see, 83.29 speed ranking, much faster than I expected. Much faster than I expected when looking at this code and the amount of times I used list iteration. I went through all the items in S, and I added an enumerate function anyway. With all these things, I figured it would have been much slower than this. I am no genius when it comes to algorithms and data structures, but I am proud of what I do know. So I'm gonna leave it there. I thank you for checking out the show. And if you like what we're doing over here, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. All right, y'all. Till next time, you know how it goes. Keep building.